It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and, of course, Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And a lot of work underway indeed right now. We had the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday, and farmers are busy. I just appreciated people taking some time to fit us in to have a short conversation to find out what they are working on their farms right now. But I could really feel this is a busy time. And who's also busy is Mother Nature, creating some real havoc. You look at what's going on right now on the eastern side of the U.S. and some of the rain. I know Ontario and the Maritimes, I think, are getting some of that here as well. And the heat. And then you got the thunderstorms in the Northern Plains. We're supposed to get some sort of epic rainfall here over the weekend in parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Upwards of like almost 8 inches in the Alberta foothills, which we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But lots to chat about here today on the RealAg Issues Panel. And what I'm going to do is bring them in right now. Let's bring in Kelvin and Lyndsey, both of RealAgriculture. And hey, Kelvin, how's it going?
Doing well. The sun is shining here so far, but yeah, we do have some rain in the forecast, and I think for a large part of Western Canada, the northern plains in the U.S. as well, this precipitation, there's a lot of hope and prayer that this comes through in terms of providing some moisture. Maybe not 8 inches. 8 inches is way more than what is useful, but some precipitation would certainly be welcomed in a large area here.
Yeah, fill in some of those dugouts. For on those foothills, there's a lot of ranches, and so they'll be looking to fill some of those dugouts, and 8 inches would do more than that. And there's a lot of concern in like High River, Alberta. We're almost to the day of that epic flood in High River, Alberta. What's going back, 7-ish years? Is that maybe more already?
I think more than that.
Is it 10 years? Well, it's a while ago, but it's very much in the memories. My parents, I was with my parents last night, and they were watching the local news and from Calgary on Global, and yeah, a lot of angst for a lot of people in that area. Hey, Lyndsey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How's everybody else?
Is it still you get nothing but rain? So,
okay. Well,
are you getting some sunshine?
It's not entirely true. In that we actually dried out for us. We actually had gone quite some time without rain. We did have rain hit last night, with a vengeance. And to that point of too much water all at once, I am in the Ottawa, River Valley. We did have a storm go through. Nothing like my friends in Southern Ontario who they got one of those like 4 inches in 1 hour kind of hits. So a lot of overland flooding, a lot of, running water. We actually, where I am, we just got sort of a shot overnight, that did wake me up in the dead of night to run around and close windows, because it was blowing sideways into the house with all the wind. But we needed it, not nearly as bad, obviously, as some other areas, but, we managed to, this week has been nuts. We managed to get first cut hay done this week, which is great. So that it was an incredibly well-timed rain, in that perspective. That's for sure.
Yeah, good stuff. Hey, everybody. Today we're also going, I didn't mention this, we're also going to have Kody Blois on the show here today. Now, he's got a new big role. We're going to find out about, he's swinging with the big cats now. He is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Mr. Mark Carney, obviously also from King's Hants in Nova Scotia. He was, of course, the popular pick everybody thought would be the Ag Minister, and that decision went to Heath MacDonald, who is now the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food for Canada, who we heard about was out and about last weekend, was on Rob Stone's farm. Rob was on the show here yesterday talking about that. But we're going to be joined by Kody. He's going to talk about what does the Parliamentary Secretary of the PM do, and also some of the other work that he is doing there at the PMO office. So if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture, and we'll be joined by Kody Blois, the Parliamentary Secretary of the PM, right after this. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's the RealAg Issues Panel today. We got Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, myself, Shaun Haney, all of Real Agriculture. But we got a guest here for the second segment. It's Kody Blois. He is Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Mr. Mark Carney, and of course coming out of King's Hants out of Nova Scotia. How are we doing today, Kody?
Shaun, I'm doing well. Always great to join you and Kelvin and Lyndsey, and looking forward to the discussion.
Oh, awesome stuff. Okay, so you weren't selected to be the Minister of Ag, and there was rumors, floating around that there's bigger plans for Kody Blois. It's now official. You're the Parliamentary Secretary to the PM. What does the Parliamentary Secretary to the PM do?
A great question. That's what most people ask when you first tell them that. I think it's important for listeners first to understand that in the Westminster style in Canada, ministers normally have what's called parliamentary secretary. So all ministers have these, including the Prime Minister. It's essentially a junior minister portfolio. You work closely with your particular minister to take questions in the House, to be able to maybe manage stakeholders, to be able to represent the minister in question in their activity. So it's to support the minister in question. Each prime minister traditionally has handled this role a little bit differently, and we can get into kind of what the prime minister and I discussed. But essentially, I will be kind of appended to the prime minister's office. I will be there to help to support the prime minister as he sees fit. And look, on the cabinet piece, let me just say, obviously it was a personal disappointment. These decisions are never easy. I think agriculture has really benefited from having, Heath MacDonald. He'll be, I think, a very strong champion for the sector. He and I work well. So, I enjoyed my very brief time in that ministry, obviously still close and care to, both the issues relating to the file, but I'm excited to be able to support the government in the role that I've been delineated.
Yeah. Kelvin?
Kody, you've also been appointed co-chair of this new economic growth caucus within your Liberal caucus. Between that and your parliamentary secretary role, how do you see some of these agricultural policies or files that you are very familiar with? How do you see them fitting into your mandates in those roles?
Well, yeah, and I can expand a little bit on kind of, as you can appreciate, the Prime Minister has hit the ground running. The government has had a very ambitious agenda. Prime Minister and I have talked about a few of the areas in where I can plug in to help support the government's work. One of the things that he's asked me to do is to co-chair, because there is another parliamentary secretary. Her name is Rachel Ben-Dian. She's a Montreal-based member of parliament who was also in the cabinet just recently. We are co-chairing this economic growth caucus. It was started actually a couple of years ago by some business-minded Liberal MPs who wanted to have a forum to be able to engage with CEOs of major Canadian companies and leadership of specific industries to make sure that members of parliament had access to people who know their stuff, right? And the ability to engage on these issues. It was a very successful forum. The Prime Minister himself actually was at one of these sessions about 18 months ago, saw the benefit and said, I want to have one in my name where we can be able to bring in stakeholders. We've already had 5 sessions. We've had Nancy Southern from Alberta, who's the CEO of ATCO, major company in Western Canada. We've had the chief economist from all the major national banks. We've had Tracy Robinson, the CEO from CN, obviously a huge connection on railroad and agriculture. But we've also had Woodfibre LNG, the CEO, which is the largest liquefied natural gas project in Canadian history, also the lowest emitting. And we also had Dan Kelly from CFIB. So it's been a great forum. We'll continue it in the fall. What I'm hoping to also be able to tackle a little bit, Kelvin, is red tape reduction. You know, I'm passionate about regulatory modernization. I think the audience out there, farmers who are, you know, in their truck right now or out on the field, they'll know that sometimes it's the little irritants of the way in which government can reasonably get out of the way, which is most important. Yes, public investment and big billion-dollar programs are nice. But it's also about the red tape reduction. So I'm hoping to support the Prime Minister there. And the last piece I would say is, again, we have Minister McDonald, we have Minister Sidhu, who is our international trade minister, who will help carry some of the exporting commodity files. But if I can plug in and help support them and help support the Prime Minister, we really got to make sure we're supporting our exporting commodities at a time that the world is very uncertain out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Lyndsey?
Well, we can maybe at some point, if we have time, dig into the pace at which things are zooming through Parliament right now, which of course is creating some consternation. But more specifically, thinking about this one Canadian economy bill that is moving forward, I'd love to get your thoughts on where you see agriculture fitting into there, because I know a lot of the focus right now is on energy projects and those sorts of things. But, you know, this is an industry that works globally for sure, as you know. Where does Canadian agriculture fit in some of these projects in this bill?
Well, Lyndsey, just again for your listeners, the one Canadian economy bill is also stylized Bill C-5, which is before the House. There's two components in this, and it is expected to pass the House of Commons today. It was a piece of legislation that the government expedited to some consternation. To your point, we can get into that, but the government is trying to move quickly because, as I said to David Cochrane on CBC this week on Power and Politics, some elements of the Canadian economy, some areas we can feel kind of comfortable. You know, things are okay. Why are we moving so fast? But, you know, if you're in an impacted sector right now that are facing duress from U.S. tariffs or markets that are very uncertain because of the global geopolitics, governments need to move. People want government to move faster. This was a change election. Mark Carney was elected to present the change that Canadians were wanting. So the legislation does two things. It removes all federal barriers to interprovincial trade. Obviously has significant impacts on agriculture in terms of we have different stratas of agriculture in this country. We have the major exporters that may not touch upon interprovincial trade so much. But if you're a smaller producer in this country who relies upon provincial abattoirs and you're in a situation or a region of the country where you're frustrated, where your inability to be able to have meat processed and then ship it just across a provincial boundary and you feel that's unreasonable, this is the type of bill that's going to help support those types of outcomes. There's a way to do this without compromising our international trading relationships that we have that are extremely important, so that the interprovincial trade piece, that the federal removal of all barriers is going to pertain to agriculture. Absolutely. The other piece is about building major national projects. And to your point, Lyndsey, probably more on mining, natural resource, but there may be a big infrastructure play that somehow has a connection to agriculture. Not yet sure, because of course it is enabling legislation to try to expedite the federal approvals around major projects. This has been frankly, a problem. We need to be able to build big projects. What this bill is not about doing, it's not about undermining constitutional rights to Indigenous people. It's not about taking shortcuts on the environment. Yes, the government's still committed there, but it's about taking the multitude of federal regulatory authorities and saying we can't have approvals in 2 or 3 spaces, waiting on 3 or 4 other agencies for an undue amount of time. We have to streamline that into one process, and that's exactly what this legislation is about.
Yeah, you can still take all those things into consideration, still move forward. It's where it has to be perfect, and each of those streams is where we fall into this trap of nothing happening, because we have to build like this perfect sort of situation where everybody can say, "Yep, I'm 2 thumbs up." It just stalls us out. It would be
the agriculture sector would have some sense on this, Shaun. And look, this is step number 1. This is the first 3 or 4 weeks of Parliament. Again, just for your listeners, We are committing to reaching our 2% defense target of GDP by the end of this fiscal year. Because again, farmers care about agriculture, but they're Canadian citizens or American citizens. You know, in the case that I know this is a program that touches upon both sides. That's really important. The NATO spending commitment. We're committing to Bill C-5. There's also some affordability measures therein. So there's some really good action. The next step, Lyndsey and Kelvin and Shaun, I think, is moving into the regulatory modernization piece that can touch upon agriculture. We had some really good things in our platform that I know Minister MacDonald is committed to moving on. Economic lens on CFIA, you know, very needed. And again, the work that the folks at CFIA do is extremely important, not taking anything away from that, but we have to be able to put a competitive lens. That's our job as policymakers, is to actually give the tools to our regulatory authorities to consider this as part of their mandate. Same with PMRA. There has to be a balance there. That is something we have to get right, but there's a multitude. We could look at through transport lens. We could look at other types of federal statutes that pertain to agriculture. There's a lot of good work to do. And the ethos of this government is we're here to remove red tape without compromising public policy values, but we got to be more competitive. And agriculture and the farmers that are listening to the show, that's got to be, I hope, music to their ears.
Well, something that's not music to the ears of some members of our audience, others very much so, is the issue of Bill C-202, which is the new version of 282. And a lot of our audience would have been hearing us talking about that over the last couple years. It breezed through the House, breezed through the Senate. I guess a lot of people are concerned on the export side of this, that this does compromise our ability to, as a country, to do trade deals going forward. I guess, how do you stand on this one, Kody? Is this something that you support?
Look, I obviously supported 282. Let me just put this in context, because I had some very constructive conversations with the folks from CAFTA, from a number of our exporting commodities, who of course were concerned about this. I think the bill is only so long and is only so strong, frankly, as the political problem is. It is codifying what all political parties were saying during the election, which is that they will protect the integrity of supply management, that we will protect and stand shoulder to shoulder. The supply managed industry is extremely important in this country, but I don't want to see a cleavage in agriculture. It can be both at the same time. Now, there may be skeptics out there that say that that can't be the case, but we have signed trade deals all around this world without giving up supply managed access. We can continue to do so. We can continue to leverage, frankly, the initiatives that matter to the exporting commodities. So yes, C-202 moved through. All parliamentarians, not just Liberal or Bloc Québécois, Conservatives as well. And through the Senate, I think the Senate looked at this and said, this is the second time the House has sent this to us. It's not our job to necessarily defy the will of the House of Commons, the elected body. But my focus, Shaun, as the PS to the Prime Minister, as I know it'll be for Minister MacDonald and other parliamentarians, is how do we make sure that we advance the initiatives we just talked about? Red tape reduction, focusing on agri-marketing initiatives to make sure we can expand markets, put in an economic lens on CFIA, PMRA. There is a whole host of initiatives, both non-cost and some that would be reasonably costed from a government, that we can be advancing, and I expect we will be advancing in the days ahead to show that balance. At the end of the day, we believe in supply management. We believe in the ability to protect that domestic capacity and that production, but that doesn't preclude us from advancing the interests of the significant exporting commodities that matter is equally across this country as well.
Kelvin, you got another?
Sure. I know this is maybe something peeking behind the curtain a little bit, but Kody, in your new role as a parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, how much interaction do you actually have with the Prime Minister? We know there were some key meetings that took place this week at the G7 and of course NATO meeting on the horizon as well, meetings with people like Modi from India. There's been some reconnection on the China front, and of course these ongoing talks with the President of the US on a new trade framework or some sort of deal there. Any insight into where those files are at, and again, I guess what your interaction level is with Prime Minister Carney on them?
Yeah, look, I have a weekly meeting alongside Rachel Bendian, my co-parliamentary secretary, with the Prime Minister. So we get weekly access. I'll be honest. I mean, we have a new chief of staff, a new clerk of the Privy Council coming in. And so the prime minister has had major international focuses. He's headed to NATO, as you mentioned. He's got a meeting with the European Council. He had the G7. So there's been a lot of things happening. Marc-André Blanchard is the incoming chief of staff for Prime Minister Carney. He brings a ton of private sector experience. He was Canada's ambassador to the UN. And he has been the CEO of McCarthy Tetro. Really, really strong business guy. Lots of background as a CEO and as a thinker and someone who has managed organizations. He will be good for this government. He will be good for this prime minister. We also have Michael Sabia, who is a former deputy minister of finance. He was most recently the CEO of Hydro-Quebec. He is going to be coming in as the clerk of the Privy Council, so the head civil servant in the country. Those two gentlemen alongside the prime minister represent, I think, a very business-centric type of government that will be focused on moving issues around economic concern. And I think that should be good news for the agriculture sector. I don't pretend to be sitting down with the prime minister when he's having those conversations directly with President Trump. That's not necessarily my purview. But what I would want to highlight to your audience, because I know it's significantly heavy in Western Canada, we know Chinese tariffs are having an impact on canola and pea exports, lobster in my neck of the woods in Atlantic Canada. That's a challenging geopolitical relationship right now, given everything that's happening. But I think what hopefully should give some level of comfort that the prime minister is listening and understands is that he has had a conversation with the premier of China. We are regularizing our communication with the Chinese government, and hopefully there can be a pathway to be able to try to resolve those trade issues that do exist. The fact that Modi was at the G7 represents, again, for exporting commodities, particularly to the Indo-Pacific, I think a really important signal that this government is going to try to be pragmatic in its relationships in the world. The United Arab Emirates, for example, I had a very constructive conversation with the head of their business council, Canada UAE. They want Canadian beef. They want Canadian lobster. They look at Canadian canola as a great opportunity. There's a tremendous market in the Middle East that we should be expanding on, that we need to be making sure we're getting boots on the ground. There is so much market potential out there. I know our industry does a very good job. It's our government's job to create those people-to-people relationships between governments and say, you need more Canada in your life, whether or not that's energy, whether or not that's food, critical minerals. Canada has so much to offer the world, and this prime minister and this government's committed to making that happen.
Well, hey, Kody, really appreciate you joining us here today. We've been talking to Kody Blois. He's a parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, as well as obviously representing his constituency there in Kings Hants in Nova Scotia. Kody, thanks for joining us here on the RealAg Issues Panel.
Thanks, Shaun.
Hey, we got more coming up here. We got to break all this down. Things that Kody said, what did we hear, as well as a whole bunch of other ag issues here. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
We were talking about when that flood was in High River, Alberta. And Kelvin looked up during the commercial break. Kelvin, 12 years ago?
That's right. 2013, June 20th. Today is the anniversary of that flood, and yeah, they're preparing. It sounds like the river levels are quite low in the foothills area right now, so there is room to take some water. But even if it's dry, if you get 8 inches of rain, that you'll still have overland flooding, I'm sure. So hopefully it doesn't isn't that extreme, or doesn't come that quickly.
Yeah. Hey, register for the Soils for Our Future conference, a gathering of global to local perspectives. Join the industry July 20th through the 25th at the RBC Convention Center in Winnipeg. You learn more by going to soilsforourfuture.ca. Okay, we just had Mr. Blois on. Lyndsey, what did you take out of that conversation that you think we need to dig into a little bit more?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think I'm really appreciative to get Kody's time. Certainly, I think many of us sort of thought he was a shoo-in for the ag minister, and we're looking forward to that kind of conversation and that relationship going forward of having that access, because he's certainly always been really open with us and giving us his time. So it's really cool to sort of have, the Parliamentary Secretary to the PM willing to sort of sit down with us and answer our questions. So I appreciate that very much. And also it does, I think, it gives me a bit of hope that, agriculture will make its way to the attention of the Prime Minister, perhaps more than we've seen in past governments of any color, really, but specifically Liberal. I think this has been a challenge for agriculture for the last long while, to be seen as, a productive, economically important part of our economy. And I think that Kody Blois understands that. And granted, I know he's not, sitting next to the PM every day, but I think it does give some access that I don't know that we would have had before. Obviously, he's not the ag minister. It's not the only thing he's going to be focused on, but I do get the sense that that he understands the importance and will push for that where it's appropriate. That's what I'm hopeful of, and I think I'm right on that one.
Well, and Lyndsey, you know what I've thought about is that, honestly, if you couldn't be the ag minister, this is kind of like the really good plan B or A-2. I don't know. And the reason I say that, because it gives the opportunity for somebody that knows something about agriculture to be like whispering in the PM's ear when they're maybe on a flight somewhere, or maybe, having that lunch catch up, or whatever they do. To be someone just to be able to say, hey, you know what? That's an issue for that industry, but it's actually also very true for agriculture. Why not work in just in the daily, some of the messaging? It's an opportunity for agriculture to have a little bit more of a voice behind the scenes than we had in the Trudeau government. Is that how you see it, Lyndsey?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I, as we look at how this Liberal government is moving forward, obviously very quickly on a lot of things, and what the focus is for the Carney government, I think that agriculture fits in very well to some of the things that this government wants to do. And so exactly that, I think I'm hopeful that having, that voice in those circles, more so than we've seen before, it will work well. It'll work in our favor, I think.
Kelvin, curious on your perceptions, but what stuck out to me again is this, and this is my opinion. Okay, so I maybe I'm totally wrong on this. This continued hey, we're working with China and we're going to sort this out. We know its impact. This whole discussion from ag circles about that the tariff on canola has anything to do with, well, it does have to do with EVs, but that's not the source of it. This is not an easy one to unwind. It's not just about having better relationships with China. It's way more complicated than that.
It is, because it is directly involved testing Canada's relationship and loyalty to the U.S. versus China. And just yesterday, we saw Prime Minister Carney announce import quotas or tariff rate quotas on steel coming into the country. So further restrictions on Chinese steel coming into Canada. We're kind of moving backwards there if we're tying the steel and aluminum and EV tariffs directly to our agricultural export tariffs into China. And so, yeah, it isn't that simple. But at the same time, I think there are good signs here in terms of progress on this file and some willingness from both sides to work together. And I think my two takeaways from Kody's interview here are, the first one is completely in line with what you guys have talked about here in terms of, I'm not sure the last time we had anybody within the PM's orbit that is not only an advocate for agriculture, but understands agriculture and the context of it and the political dynamics between the different sectors within Canadian agriculture, that type of thing. Like you said, Shaun, there's going to be opportunity here for Kody to pass a briefing note to Prime Minister Carney. Hey, why don't you throw this into your speech when you're speaking in Alberta next time? That kind of thing, referencing canola or referencing export infrastructure that could help agriculture. I think there's going to be opportunity there for him to influence and inform the Prime Minister's speaking points, the messaging that he sends, and make sure that agriculture is integrated into there at a level that I don't think even the agriculture minister has in terms of impact and influence. I think if the ag minister brought that to Prime Minister Carney would be like, well, that's for you as the ag minister to deal with. That's not for my messaging, that kind of thing. Whereas I think there's a bit of an advisory role that Blois gets to play here with the Prime Minister in his position. And that's something that we certainly haven't seen for the last 10 years of federal government. And I'd argue Prime Minister Harper maybe didn't have anybody in his inner circle with that level of awareness of agriculture. The other thing is the business, the shift. Blois called it a change election, and I haven't been totally convinced that this was a change election when you have Stephen Guilbeault still sitting in cabinet and a lot of the same players. But when you look at the inner circle that Carney has appointed, there's a lot of business and economic sense and background and expertise that has been appointed into that inner circle. And so I'm not sure that we'll agree on their philosophy for how to grow business and the level of government intervention involved, especially with a lot of these people's background in Quebec and the Quebec culture of doing business versus other parts of the country and the way we think businesses should be run and the way markets work. But there is certainly a change and a focus on business, economics, trade, and I think that's another takeaway. And I think Kody under certainly leans into that in his discussions around what this government looks like and how it's going to work.
Well, talk about change. Andrew Coyne is in the Globe and Mail with an opinion column saying we need to get rid of corporate taxes in Canada to really spark economic activity in the corporate community. We can talk about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio. It's the RealAg Issues Panel, back right after this. I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
This morning I had the opportunity to guest host AgriTalk for Chip Flory, who's out doing some serious fishing in Ontario, so on a big trip. So can't wait to hear those fish stories. But I got to fill in this morning, and I'll ask you two the really hard-hitting question that I asked Davis Michelson, the news guy. In one of the bump pieces of music, we heard the AC/DC song "Noise Pollution." It ain't noise pollution, or whatever the name of that is. It's escaping me. But I said, okay, Bon Scott, Brian Johnson. Who was the better lead singer of AC/DC? Who are we going with, Kelvin?
Which was the first one?
Bon Scott was the first guy.
Yeah. He was the better one. I honestly, I didn't listen. Too young, I guess, to have really listened when he was around. But yeah, I'd say going back, those recordings are superior. I'd say.
Yeah, the old jailbreak. Lyndsey, who would you go with?
I can't say that I have a preference. Now, if we were talking about which Bond is the best Bond, that's a real conversation.
So Davis said he was not really a fan of AC/DC. Are you this?
So I'm okay with it. It is very, it's AC/DC is it's one of those hey, it exists, but I'm not a huge fan. I know there are some very large ones. I would say it is it's social music, like a Manitoba social. There'd be a couple AC/DC songs that everybody, sure, cool. But I don't know. I'm indifferent.
I'm in the same boat. It's completely tied to experiences in the situation where you've like that song, like an epic intro at a hockey game or something like that. Where that's where the 80s music has a good fit.
I'll tell you. I go into these YouTube vortexes sometimes. AC/DC, Enter Sandman, Virginia Tech football team doing their entrance. That is epic along those lines. I'm actually supposedly going to see one of the best AC/DC cover bands, BCDC, Eureka, Montana, in August at the Bowl. I'm looking.
Hang
on.
Rewind 15 seconds. Did you say Enter Sandman, AC/DC?
Oh, but I'm sorry. Oh my God! What am I doing?
Yeah, Thunderstruck, AC/DC.
Yes. What am I doing? Oh, thank you, Kelvin. Thanks for that. I appreciate.
That's what Kelvin does, actually. Kelvin
He's just always correcting me. In this case, I have to agree. No. I was very wrong.
We'll get the facts right on the important agriculture related stuff here. People aren't listening to the music.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about 202. We asked Blois about this, and here's what's come to the light: is 202 breezed through. This is the second time the voted in House of Commons has said, "Yep, we're doing this," and Senate sort of like, "Okay, who are we to push back on this?" It sort of olays through the Senate. And now we have this piece of legislation that, I guess the SM industry can really say, hey, look, protection for our industry. Meanwhile, everybody's sort of like, I don't know, like we can get around it. Lyndsey, I'm just very confused on if that's the case. If it's just a political billboard, why?
So I think it's important as an industry that we don't, like, I completely understand where our export dependent industries come up and say, this is not good. We have to have that conversation. I think it's important that they say that it's not good. At the same time, when we dig into the actual mechanics of this bill, it can be worked around. And I feel like it has the capacity, and frankly already has happened, to sort of cause division and infighting and all these sorts of things in agriculture. And so on one hand, like, I don't agree with the bill. I don't agree with, and I don't even see why we're doing it, to be honest. At the same time, I feel like we need to keep it in the context of what it really will end up doing or not doing. And perhaps let's stay focused on, like, let's not let it become so divisive and move on. Why we had to have this bill again, why it had to sail through, why it becomes law. It really is political wrangling, I think, honestly. And so my concern is it creates more animosity within the agriculture community and as an industry than is really required. And we can decide to not let it do that. Yeah. So that would be my hope.
I just think outsider borders, like it just, all the predictable questions now I'm getting from U.S. ag media, like, hey, what about this? What do you like? What they're seeing is the SM point of view, which is, hey, this is protectionist. Dairy's off the table. How is the U.S. industry going to react to it? And it feels odd having to do interviews and then explain, don't worry about a piece of legislation. We can get around it anyway. It kind of makes us. That sounds odd as it comes out of your mouth when you're speaking to somebody outside of the country. But that's just sort of my sort of like, what am I saying, or how's this being perceived? I think this seems kind of makes Canadian lawmaking sort of sound almost like silly. Like I don't know, Kelvin, what's your point of view here?
Oh, it is complicated, and I'm not sure the Bloc MPs behind this bill that have advocated for it 3 times now. We're thinking of international audiences in terms of how it's perceived and thinking about their backyard in terms of the dairy vote domestically. But yeah, it is I think largely symbolic, and I'm not sure that we should put a lot of faith in it not being able to be changed. But I think it does. Well, 2 points. It potentially gives Canada a card to play here, as it's a line has been drawn in the sand, whether it's symbolic or not, and for negotiators now to move that line potentially the U.S. will have to give up something, or whichever country we're negotiating with, to get that line moved, because the negotiators can say, hang on, we have to go through the political process of making this change after this law was approved, that kind of thing. And the other point, I think, is, now I forget what it is. There's two. Yeah, I had another point here in terms of, I think we should actually maybe be thankful that it zoomed through so quick because of that divisiveness point that Lyndsey made. This isn't going to be dragging out for another 6 months here, tying up groups and tearing people apart, that kind of thing. It is passed now, or it's gone through the Senate and the House and House of Commons. So it's not dragging out, I would say, in terms of if we're going to pick our battles. This one has now it's no longer a battle.
Well, hey, to your first point though, that's like the idea of, hey, well, we could talk. We can't talk about I guess we've introduced an issue that now we can use to get other things. Maybe
similar,
which is kind of like what President Trump does all the time, right? You put on a tariff or you put on some sort of obstacle, and it's like, well, if you want this removed, you got to give us something. And it
Canada's doing it with this digital sales tax as well here at the end of the month. Yesterday, Francois Philippe Champagne said that Canada's going ahead with this digital sales tax. That is a major irritant for the U.S. administration as well. And again, I think that's another thing that Canada then has on the table in terms of cards it can play.
Yeah. Well, I want to hit on the Andrew Coyne column that's in the Globe, and he's suggesting radical tax reform on the corporate side to break Canada out of its growth rut. And weirdly, like we text amongst the three of us about a lot of stuff during the week. I mentioned earlier this week that I thought we need to appreciate more some of the corporate tax laws that we do have, especially when it comes to small businesses making under $500,000 and pretty advantageous rate, especially even compared to a lot of U.S. states, for example. Kelvin, getting rid of the corporate tax period federally, that boy, we'll talk about maybe attracting some capital and shaking the tree. That might be it.
That's the point that Coyne is making in this opinion column, and he's saying abolishing the corporate income tax. So there could potentially be different taxes on corporations at different levels, potentially on dividends, that type of thing, or not on dividends, on income. My terminology is mixed up here. On other aspects of where there could be taxation applied to corporations, but not on income tax because of the incentive. He's talking about how trade. There's all this talk about trade diversification right now in Canada, but that's going to take decades to actually execute on that strategy. There's talk about other ways of driving or getting our economy going, but the quickest way would be to attract capital from outside the country, and nothing like removing the corporate income tax rate. And he makes the case that would be a shock to the system that would get us into this, out of this rut without productivity and increases and growth, that type of thing. So, yeah, I think this would be a good. In theory, his argument is strong. I think politically, it would not fly very well to say, corporations aren't going to have to pay income tax anymore, because we know how that would fly on the left side of the spectrum politically.
But again, this is what other jurisdictions, they do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, like Ireland or some of these countries, I don't know, I haven't looked exactly, but at the comparison. But yeah, some countries have gone this extreme to attract foreign investment.
Well, there's a reason why there's so many companies that are, they're registered in Delaware, because there's no corporate tax. Lyndsey, go ahead.
Well, I think more broadly speaking, going through this last election, I think one of, the criticisms from many people watching it was that exactly as we talked about earlier in the show, is this, change election, and is it really a change? And like to Coyne's point, like even in the election, what was talked about, what was floated by, what was, it still wasn't like any huge change. Like it was still incremental, these ideas, what the parties were really talking about. And so here we are now into the beginning of this Carney government. And yes, I think there are some definite differences in how Carney is running things and those sorts of things, but like gigantic, big moves of this magnitude, I don't know. I mean, it's not a terribly Canadian thing to do, to be this, bold but if we're serious about, and it does seem like Carney's messaging is that we need to change some structural things within Canada to improve our situation here and make us less dependent, or at least less vulnerable to changes in the U.S., something like this would be, it'd be a bold move. That's for sure.
It would be an awakening in some boardrooms where there has, going through this process of, okay, well, do we need to be, because of all the tariffs, right? Hey, do we need to be in Canada, or do we need to move our operation to the U.S. to, take out the geopolitical risk? This would be a major shot in the arm for the, when you're making the pro-con table in terms of like, you know what? Canada's a good place to be.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
But politically, that would be interesting to watch the Liberals try to talk through that. Kelvin, wrap up with what you.
I was just going to say what I was trying to say before was one of the proposals he has is that we should tax cash flow. So all money received is taxable, paid out. All money paid out or spent is deductible. That means that your capital purchases are essentially fully deductible in the moment, in the year, and so there's benefits there. And there's actually some academic research that shows income taxes on corporations hurt workers, hurt wages actually paid to workers, and so there might be an argument there. It's probably pretty difficult politically uphill in terms of arguing that workers would actually benefit from this as well.
Okay, we got to take a break. This show is flying by today. We got to talk about TB and some of the concern there in the cattle sector, as well as maybe we'll get to also Maha getting some pushback at a Wall Street Journal Food Summit event this week in the United States. You're listening to RealAg Radio. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner back right after.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
I've had a lot of embarrassing moments in the radio business. Like I've got some stories to tell, but Lyndsey, I'm very embarrassed about mixing up Metallica and AC/DC songs. That's bad.
No, you know what? We have a tough job having to think on our feet. So it's allowed. Hats off to Kelvin for correcting you at all times. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's gonna be on my tombstone. That's gonna be like on my tombstone.
Yeah.
Here lies Shaun Haney.
Yes.
Constantly corrected by Kelvin Heppner.
Yes, constantly. And that's great.
It's overstated.
Yeah.
It's really not, guys.
Correct it. I'll go on the record to correct you.
Nice. Lyndsey, TB.
Yes.
Fill us in here. Give us the context of what's going on.
Okay. So, and actually one of the things that all of this begs are more questions, right? So, bovine TB, tuberculosis, all bad, but it was found. So we have a confirmed positive herd in southern Manitoba in a dairy herd. And so I am actually on later this afternoon. I'll be on with CFIA to ask some follow-up questions, many follow-up questions actually, and quite a few technical questions because, the finding of TB in a dairy herd is quite rare, very rare here in Canada. And in posting that story, in reporting the news of that happening, we did get some feedback of course, people in the beef industry who are perhaps more familiar with this just because the exposure to wildlife, et cetera, asking for some of these things like, should I be worried about this? Should I not? What do I need to know? All those sorts of things. So there's a lot of questions. It is an incredibly serious disease, obviously, and like several other livestock diseases, every disease is sort of handled a little bit differently as to, what happens next, what sort of biosecurity protocols are put in place, all of those sorts of things. So I have a laundry list of questions for the CFIA expert later. So I will have likely though that interview on Tuesday's show. So hang around or head to realagriculture.com for the latest in between now and then. Because, there is a question of how this farm was infected with bovine TB, and of course what happens next. There is a related story. We did have one person ask, because this will result in a depopulation of these animals, and farmers are compensated for that. There was a question of cattle prices are through the roof right now. Will the government dollars actually be for modern cattle prices? So that is also in play, and we've got a story coming up on that as well, because they are revising those figures, because let's face it, cattle are worth a heck of a lot more than they were 5 years ago.
Well, they are indeed. They are indeed.
Yes.
And sticking with the cattle is Secretary Rollins this week came out with a 5-point plan as it applies to dealing with this New World screwworm.
Yes.
As well, and the reopening of a facility, right, Lyndsey, in Texas for the fly.
Yeah, and this is what's really fascinating. And if anybody caught the conversation on the Ruminating with RealAg podcast, it's really important that there be sterile male flies released to keep New World screwworm further enough south that it doesn't impact the Mexican and U.S. cattle markets and cattle. You have to have literally millions of these male sterile flies. So a lot of these facilities were either shuttered or, hadn't been used in a while or were repurposed for other things. So yes, there will be funding into either changing over, improving, reopening some of these facilities, because as of right now, as far as I understand it, most of the sterile flies are coming out of Panama. And so there just needs to be more production of these sterile male flies. So that's where that is going to ramp up as well, because that's a key part of not just controlling the outbreak, but actually pushing the population down, literally funneling it down through Mexico and pushing it south so that these flies can't continue to infect coming north.
Kelvin, we also had the Federal Reserve this week say, hey, we're holding on rates, and all guesses on when they actually start to cut it, whether that's September or in 2026.
Yeah, and kind of keeping their powder dry in terms of the impact of tariffs and potential inflation if tariffs cause inflation. So this didn't necessarily go over well at the White House, but it sounded like Jerome Powell kind of wanted to wait and see some more economic data before moving ahead with those cuts.
It's the tariffs are not showing themselves in inflation numbers yet. It's been slow. Just like some of the corporate job cuts, maybe the Doge cuts as well, aren't showing up in unemployment numbers yet either. It's definitely a real kind of lag. It feels like it should be here already, but I'm not a statistician.
There's so many factors, though. Again, it comes down to timing, because people saw the tariffs coming, and so they rushed to buy and rushed to import, and so that we have to work through some of those stockpiles, and it's a matter of timing too. So yeah, it hasn't necessarily played out in theory the way some people thought it would immediately in terms of impact of tariffs. But I think a lot of that has to do with timing. And I've always been, if you look at the U.S. deficits and how the first Trump administration blew the U.S. deficit open, I've always wondered why the Biden administration and the Democrats didn't blame inflation during their term on the spending that Trump and the Trump administration did originally, because it takes years to play out. And I think there is a strong argument that some of that inflation during the Biden administration was actually snowballed effects from things that happened in the first Trump administration. I think there's such a lag on this that it doesn't necessarily always match up with our political cycles, and politicians sometimes aren't held accountable for that reason.
Well, we can continue this conversation in the bonus segment and a few things we didn't get to. Kelvin, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend.
I appreciate it, Lyndsey.
Mm-hmm. Happy solstice, everyone.
The days are starting to get shorter.
Stop.
If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to the bonus segment here for all you RealAg Radio podcast listeners, or better known as the place where things go off the rails. Okay, so we kind of sped.
There were a couple moments we went off the rails during the show.
Yeah.
During the actual.
Today was not our strongest showing.
We did good outside of like
Sure.
Shaun claiming that Enter
I'm
Sandman
so-
was sung by AC/DC.
But guys, I'm tired. We did not. Okay, I'm just gonna jump because that's the kind of day it's been. We didn't talk about that Anne Murray, a legend, is 80 today. It's her birthday, so happy birthday. Just gonna note I talked to someone today who thought that she was dead. She's not. She's 80. Also, though, Shaun, you did not, and not with Kody Blois either, mention the new Spaceballs movie.
Yeah, I'm excited. Like,
I'm surprised.
there's one thing you can get excited about the new Happy Gilmore movie. The jury's out on how good it will be or won't be. Adam Sandler can really be hit or miss. Okay. But Mel Brooks and Spaceballs, let me tell you, they're making another one. It's even bringing. So Howard Stern was talking about this yesterday. I saw a clip where Rick Moranis is coming out of retirement to do the movie. He said he wasn't going to do any more movies after his wife passed away. He was just going to take care of the kids and be a dad. The guy that brought you Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Spaceballs is coming out of retirement.
It's pretty great.
Are they going to AI John Candy?
Oh, could they?
Yeah, that's going to be who's going to play Barf. That's a good question.
There's probably a whole bunch of people listening who are like, "What the heck are they talking about?"
If somebody has not seen Spaceballs, that is an activity this weekend to do.
Just pause, go watch it, come back.
Yeah. Scroob! We're combing the desert. Oh my God.
Oh God. Okay.
But there also is like in 2025, is Mel Brooks allowed to be funny?
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah, like
Could be very uncomfortable.
I'm in the lane. Like I think Mel Brooks is a comedic genius, but he's like my mom's reaction to it was he's got to be over 100.
Speaking of, is he still alive?
Yeah, I actually thought Mel Brooks was dead.
Okay, so Chris and I actually play a game called "You're Not Allowed to Google Alive or Dead." And so you're not allowed to, you cannot use your device, you cannot search, you just have to, off the top of your head, would you say this person is alive or dead? And he will just randomly just ask me questions. And Mel Brooks would be one of them where I'd really have to think. I'm not sure. So
I'm not sure why this came to mind, but, alive or dead, Herb Tarlick from WKRP.
Oh.
I don't know why that is.
Right? Like, that's a good one. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. It's our new game. Kelvin, did you think Anne Murray was still alive?
I would have put like 80% yes. Not completely.
See? Not completely sure.
He only listens to you too. So he doesn't even know who Anne Murray is.
Did they ever do a collab? Probably not.
Did they ever do a crossover? Has Anne Murray done any songs with Post Malone? Because she might be the only person
give her time. She might.
Post Malone has a new country album coming out. It's supposed to. Apparently he's going back. Like we're going real country now. He's like, he's gonna be in the Coulter Wall vicinity of country music.
So this is like RealAg TMZ. But did I not share not long ago a reel of like Post Malone and Dwight Yoakam riding horses in Beverly Hills, down the middle of the street singing, and it was epic. And I was like, I would buy that album. And so it's coming out.
Post Malone's touring. I'm super curious. Who is showing up at a Post Malone concert? No,
everyone.
Yes, because
right?
He covers just go on Spotify and listen to a shuffle of Post Malone songs. It's everything
all over.
From rap to where he is today. It is a wide swath. And so on one hand, it's multi-talented guy, obviously, super talented. He's got his life on track after, sort of an interesting, early beginning. But the mix of people, and then the sort of the disappointment, everybody that thinks he's a country star now that didn't even know that he did rap previously.
Yeah, they're like,
they'd be showing up and it's like, what is all this rap music that's going on here in this concert in wherever? It's fast.
And Kelvin would still be waiting for you too.
No. I have a wide palette of music. It's just U2 is usually at the top of it at the end of the day.
Okay.
It's fair. It's fair enough. Okay, so Kelvin, what did we not get to?
Oh, now I'm thinking music though. I was going to add where does Jelly Roll fit in the mix here? I saw a meme yesterday where Jelly Roll is Adele for people with forklift licenses. Which I think is pretty appropriate. He's right there with Post Malone and some of these. I think they've C-202, right?
Yeah.
I've heard some interviews with him, and he comes across this way. My wife was telling me that she's a big fan, that he is known to be like the most nicest. You know, when you meet somebody that's so nice, it's like, that's not real nice. You can't be that nice.
And
it's kind of what he is.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think whether we're talking Coulter Wall, you're talking Post Malone or Jelly Roll, authenticity is certainly sells well, or people are attracted to that. You can tell, which the music industry hasn't always excelled in that. And I think there's some recognition of that now, which is cool. Maybe we could tie this in. Coulter Wall's father was in the news this week.
Brad Wall.
Bringing it back to the India trade file as Brad Wall's name has come up as a potential candidate for Canada's High Commissioner to India with the resumption of diplomatic ties there after Carney met with Modi at the G7.
Which he at least understands what pulses are, having been
very well
the Premier of Saskatchewan. So
he very much he does.
Yeah, and that's kind of important with India-Canada trade.
So I'm not. This is an observation I have. This is a little bit like Christy Clark, where we float these names because we're under the assumption they actually want to get back into the game. And
that's true.
I don't have a real perception that, like, Brad Wall's got a pretty good life. I don't have the perception that he really wants to, maybe I'm totally wrong on this, but he's an example of somebody where it's like, yeah, I did it. I'm good. I don't necessarily need to be back in that game. I don't know.
The amount of pictures he posts on social media of helping neighbors with branding. There was another one yesterday. I'm not sure he wants to miss out on that moving to India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because you'd be good at a job doesn't mean you want it. And sometimes that's just it. You get to a point in your career or life where it's like, I don't have to do that. So who knows?
I have a friend that, retired earlier than some people would think he would have. And not every, but like these roles come up where it's like, it's an executive role, CEO, leadership role where he'd probably be great at. And people float his name all the time. And I always have to give the same response. Zero interest. He's never taking that. He's not giving up the life that he currently has to get back into that rat race because he doesn't need to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So not everybody's a working fool. Like, maybe I'll be doing this when I'm 85. Be like,
yeah, probably.
I wouldn't want to. 85.
Could you imagine?
In Scully style.
Yeah.
He was in his 90s.
So I am as flummoxed by people who retire very, very early as people who do not retire. Like, there has to be some sort of middle ground there. I don't understand why you would want to be like 85.
Well, like, look at Chuck Grassley. He's in his 90s.
Yeah.
As an example, Lawrence Macaulay, politically was up there.
Go hang out with your grandkids or something. I don't know. Have a hobby. Go volunteer. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Enjoy your time. Now.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
We didn't get to the. Okay, so we don't think Brad Wall's taking that job, or he was. We came to the conclusion.
I'm like a 60-40 split.
Yeah, that he would.
Yeah.
He'd be great at it.
I understand it was basically a reporter asking Smith and Mo at that joint press conference that they had this week whether he would be a good candidate, and I'm not sure that Wall has actually said that he is putting his name in the hat, or that
could just be a rumor.
Okay, so let's stick with that press conference for a second. So Mo and Smith have a joint press conference. It's labeled as like a big thing about energy and agriculture. It was more about energy. And agriculture just sort of filtered into it. Okay, so does it increase so not a lot changed from the original demands, I'll say demands, that Daniel Smith, Premier of Alberta, was making before that first, what do we call it, first Premier's meeting or first Minister's meeting between the Prime Minister and the Premiers. Do those demands now have more efficacy for Canadians as a whole because Mo is now attached? It's just not Smith ranting and raving about what Alberta needs or doesn't need. Kelvin, what do you think?
I think so. I think it does. It does help to have not just be the Danielle Smith side on the lead side on this side and Kearney on the other side kind of thing. I think it helps to have Saskatchewan and Alberta sharing that message and doing it together and not, I know there are probably some little things where they disagree, but the big things they certainly agree on, and to have that joint press conference. The caucuses met in Lloydminster from what I understand, and then they held this press conference. I think it certainly sends a message to the federal government that that the two main prairie province economies are the larger ones are on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But have they called BC David Eby and tried to convince him? Because I feel like that might be their bigger hurdle than the feds.
Yeah.
And
certainly,
yeah.
He's certain. Well, I'm not sure we want to get into the BC provincial politics, but how can he? The fact that he missed that meeting, that first minister's meeting, and chose to be overseas promoting, I forget what somebody said, he was promoting some convenience store. He was at some convenience store that day promoting some BC product that in certain trade is important. But he was in Asia somewhere talking about some product made in BC that was on the shelves there. How do you put that over that first minister's meeting? That to me just says a lot right there in terms of.
And then come back.
And then come back.
Yeah, and be critical of all of it, and be like way out in left field on some of these and whatever. I'm not entirely sure why such things, but also to the point of, Mo and Smith getting together and putting out this joint statement, etc. I think EB, they have to have that discussion too, because I think a lot of their plans all involve traipsing across BC. So not all of them, but some.
I mentioned during the show, we never got to it, was this Wall Street Journal Global Food Forum that happened in Chicago this week. And it's always interesting when mainstream pubs do these kind of like food ag summits, and it's, there's always a lack of farmers. There's a lot of, it's a corporate affair for sure. Corteva's CEO, Chuck Magro, was there. I think Ken Seitz from Nutrien was also. A lot of talk about Maha. And one of the quotes that Mr. Magro had was that agricultural chemicals are rigorously studied before farmers can spray them on fields. Some of these products have had 100 reviews from a safety perspective. All of that really doesn't, that is very true. Doesn't seem to matter in some circles. Lyndsey, I really get the sense on this one, the industry as a whole is really trying to solidify this positioning that some of the things that are being pushed inside, RFK's support group, they're going to have real damages to the food system. It sounds good, but it's going to have some damages.
Good luck with that. Honestly, I hat goes off to all of these companies, CEOs, farmers, ranchers, people who are trying to work within the sphere of, a very prominent and very outspoken and very well supported in some circles person, really, this is one of those things in agriculture that I think we all really struggle with, is having, someone who thinks they have all the answers and who, truly believes that they have a better way of doing everything and that they're the final judgment on what's good, what's healthy, what's not. I mean, how many, I don't know, we're probably 15, 16 years into the social license conversation. I honestly, it's actually terrifying, because we know how difficult it is to try to have a nuanced, authentic conversation about crop protection, about modern farm practices, about scale of agriculture, about not fearing our food, about all these things. The amount of disinformation and misinformation, which are two different things, by the way, that is out there, and now at such a visual and lawmaking level. I have private conversations with people I know in the US, here in Canada. It is it's deeply troubling, and I'm not sure what it looks like going forward to try to have those very complicated, complex discussions about how we keep, a country fed, or how we keep our customers maybe outside of our country fed, if we are also going to fear and fearmonger and really try to tear apart. And I'm not saying we can't improve on certain things, sure, but I would prefer that, someone actually have a hot damn clue about what they're talking about before they start spouting off about, what is and is not good, bad, indifferent, whatever. And so good luck to them, but it is an uphill battle, and it is not one that I know agriculture is going to get through unscathed. That's for sure.
So in the journal article you're reading, it says Kevin Hall, who spent years as a scientist at the National Institute of Health, said he is concerned that the MAHA movement is targeting ingredients and additives, but might not be the culprit in the health problems Americans are facing. So he's quoted as saying, "If we pretend that focusing on color additives is really going to turn a product that is high in added sugars into a health product because we've removed certain chemical additives, I don't buy it," he said at the event. Of course, there's been a banning of some of those. I can't remember all the color dyes that they weren't using them in Canada, but they were still being used in the U.S. in products like Fruit Loops and other products like that. So it's yeah. Hey, Tuesday on the show promo, we're going to do something different. We're going to do a bit of a long form interview I recorded yesterday with Michael Grunwald, who is he writes for the New York Times. He's written a new book. It comes out July 1st called "We Are Eating the Earth." And we dig in on some of this. And there's some things that he says that are, you're not going to like them. But there's also some things that he says that I think are entirely fair. And so I'm really I think I pushed back enough, or were appropriate. I'm interested to see what the audience is going to say about it. Mm-hmm. And what the perspective is. And I know that it will likely raise the hair on some the back of their neck, so to speak. But I don't know. I thought it was a good discussion, and he was, some of his criticisms are fair, and he also recognizes the good things that agriculture does. So it's it'll be a bit of a good news, bad news sandwich. Definitely not a pom-pom waving. On Tuesday's show, so we got enough pom waving going on,
especially Kelvin. Anyway,
is Kelvin a pom-pommer?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I
don't think so either.
I get dragged into the weeds and into the nuance, and that's, I think, one of the things that we appreciate, or that it sounds like this book from Michael Grunwald gets into some of the nuance. It's not all silver bullets, and it's not all bad. It's about making incremental improvements, and I think that is probably the best, most realistic, pragmatic approach to taking. Because a lot of this, I think, from what I understand, Shaun, this book is about climate change and agriculture's role in emissions and that type of thing.
Yeah, that's how it started. I asked him about that, like, why the interest in this? Like, why, he lives in Miami, doesn't grow up in the industry, doesn't have like friends that are farmers, and he was tackling it from being a climate, writer. And I can tell based on some of the lingo he was dropping, he dug in pretty deep. This isn't like he's critical of people like Michael Pollan. So right there, that's a check mark. If you're,
like, you clearly have read some things.
Yeah. There's someone we don't hear from very often anymore. Michael Pollan. Remember, he was like all the rage for a while.
Mm-hmm. I would just like to point out, I do like the title with that we're eating the earth. But I would like to point out that my dad would tell you that in your lifetime, you should eat at least a peck of dirt. And it's good for you.
A peck of dirt?
Yeah, a peck of dirt. Yeah, like you should eat your carrots straight out of the garden and just wipe them off. Don't wash them. Just wipe them.
Here we go into the.
And there you go. Get those
measurement discussion here. What is a peck?
What is a peck? Yeah. Well, my dad is of a certain age. I'm pretty sure they still measure things in peck. So there you go. Shaun, did you know it's a unit of measurement?
No, I didn't actually.
Oh,
I'm usually leading this discussion on.
Yeah, you usually are. So ask around. Yeah. Do you know that a peck is a unit of measurement? It is.
I will tell you.
It's a quarter of a bushel.
That's right.
Oh,
so it's a volume.
Crop we're talking about. It's
a volume. Bushels are volume.
Peck.
So there you go.
I've been hanging out with my dad for 2 days, and he has not said used rod as a measurement.
Yes.
And we've been doing a little bit of work in the yard and stuff like that.
I'm surprised then. Yeah.
Yes,
Because he would measure things off in rods, would he not?
Yes. Hey, it's
Yes.
about 2.5 rods.
You're like, super. Could I have that in feet or inches? No?
It is a lot. Hey, Kelvin, just one more topic before we go here. And I don't mean to get serious here all of a second, but is China actually going to get in the CPTPP? We didn't talk about that.
They're certainly making some noise again. They tried getting in a few years ago and have undergone a bunch of review and process, and I think the other CPTPP countries have slow played it because they don't want to have to deal with that. But again, yesterday I believe the Chinese Ministry of Commerce spokesperson raised it again, saying, "Hey, we're ready to join the CPTPP. Where we think we've checked all the boxes. We're ready to go here." And in the meantime, I think, is it Costa Rica that is joining the deal? I think they've had a faster path to it than what China has. And of course, in a world where we are moving to multipolarity, as Jacob Shapiro would say, in Canada having to choose sides, having Canada be in the CPTPP and in an alliance with the U.S., if China's in the CPTPP, I'm not sure how you square that peg in terms of making that all work. If China is in this trade deal that was originally conceptualized as countering China's influence in world trade.
Yeah, all of a sudden that C in CPTPP will stand for China. It'll be the China deal. It won't take very long.
I feel like as Canada, we just try and get away from being stuck between the U.S. and China, and then China and the U.S. somehow managed to wrestle us back into rock and a hard place. Well, so there you go.
And I'm going to just purely speculate here. I don't think either of them realize how much Canada's in the middle of it. It's sort of it gives, we have a lot of attention on it because
it's us.
Impacted, right? Yeah. It probably isn't really that well known how in the middle Canada is if you're talking to people in China or the U.S. about it.
That's probably true.
And we actually benefit a lot from it as well. It's not all negative, especially when there isn't tension between them, where Canada can get the best of both worlds. So in terms of exports at times, so when China wants stuff.
Very, very fair. Okay, well, hey, this has been a lot of fun. Really, always enjoy the Friday show, catching up on all the things that happened this week. I do want to mention, I got a chance to, was covering a wide swath here this morning. Guest hosting AgriTalk this morning. Encourage you to check out the Friday episode there where I didn't totally embarrass myself. And this show, as we do every Friday. So, hey, Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
How much rain are you supposed to get?
Oh, I'm not sure. I don't think we have any huge amounts. It's just a couple of rainy days here.
We're hoping for about 80 millimeters in Lethbridge, I think, about that. So we'll see. Lyndsey, hopefully for some sunshine.
No, we got it today. Might rain tomorrow.
Okay, it's going to get hot.
We'll take. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, her internet's
I think it's 36 on Monday, so I will. Oh, I will be hiding.
Yeah, you're in it saying we're done. It's it's hit the limit.
Okay.
It's hit the limit. Hey, if you have any feedback, everybody, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.